Those children bear on their bodies, some of them, the marks of what we can do to one another. A young man that was 35 years old, I believe, that drove their bus around the area of Kigali and out into the bush, 35 years old, has no living relatives in his family. They were all macheted to death, and he bears the marks of human hatred on his body. There's a 24-ton elephant sitting in the corner of the room that we don't want to acknowledge, but we better. 85% of her generation knows at least 5 Christians. 15% of those 85% see a little difference in the way those Christians live and the way everybody else does. That's patently wrong. There's nothing that communicates more clearly the distinctiveness with which we should live than the Sermon on the Mount. Jackie DeShannon, most of your eyes glazed over when I said that name. I don't even know who she is. Okay? This is a younger generation. We're in trouble. Me and you and about 2 other people. Jackie DeShannon was a popular recording artist in the early and mid-'60s. She recorded a Burt Bacharach and Hal David song entitled What the World Needs Now. It vaulted her to fame and fortune. And the whole gist of her song was what the world needs now is love. Sweet love. I almost felt like I should apologize at the end of the message last week for being so despairing. Well, life is full of corollaries. There was a scientist who was sitting underneath an apple tree in medieval times, and he was sitting there contemplating some rules and laws of science, and an apple happened to fall on his head. He drew a corollary in life. Life is full of corollaries. He said, what goes up must come down. Murphy's Law, you live by that? Murphy wrote the book. Murphy's Law says that you will get in any line that has the broken register, and it will wait to break until you get to be next in line in the register. Murphy's Law says you will get in the line at the restaurant that is the shortest, but will have the person in front of you who is ordering for 5,000 people. See, those are corollaries. Those are corollaries. Nancy Reagan, when she was First Lady, started a campaign in the mid-'80s and early '90s based upon a phrase that was "just say no." The purpose of that campaign was to embolden and empower a young generation to say no to drugs. Well, when I heard that, I thought to myself, there's something missing there, because if they just say no, then the corollary would be, what do you say yes to? And I still think it's a valid argument, because there's a whole generation that said, no, we won't do drugs, but they went to something else. They found something else to say yes to. Nike's phrase for advertising is just do it. Do what? And a whole generation has gone from, oh yeah, just do it, to doing whatever they want. Jesus gives a corollary, and we looked at the negative side of it in the first 6 verses of Matthew 7. This morning we look at the next a few verses and find the positive side, the other side of the corollary. In the first part of the corollary, Jesus says, don't judge. The second part of the corollary is, do love. Mother Teresa said, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. I mean, just stop and think for a moment. Put your minds around that statement and think of where she ministered at. She ministered in a town that is probably the poorest, one of the poorest towns on the face of the earth, in Calcutta, India. People who have described Calcutta, India, describe it as 4 million people living in squalor. Mother Teresa went into Calcutta and found an infirmary to take care of the disadvantaged and the unloved and the forgotten groups of people inside the city of Calcutta. You know, had she been Americanized before she went there, she would have seen everything that she saw as negative and probably never done anything. If you judge people, you don't have time to love them. I believe that is a statement of brilliance. I really think that's what Jesus is getting at in these next few verses. He goes directly against conventional wisdom and conventional religious theory of the day. Where there were negative, narrow-minded, self-righteous people who simply dismissed the rest of humanity who wasn't like them and said, they're not like us, we're not going to do anything for them at all. They're just outside of God's grace. G.K. Chesterton said, love means to love that which is unlovable, or it is no virtue at all. You see, even the pagans, Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount, know how to love each other. It's the law of reciprocity. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. It's the axiom, I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch mine. I'll wash your hand if you'll wash mine. And those kinds of corollaries and axioms are precipitated upon self-interest and self-centeredness. To love in that fashion, as the world demands you love, is no virtue at all. Any old sinner can do that. No, love means to love that which is unlovable in order for it to be virtuous. And so in these verses this morning, we're going to take a look at magnanimous love, unfailing love, unending joy. You see, oftentimes verses 7 and 8 get passed off as a blank check for God to do whatever you ask Him to do. That somehow He is at your beck and call to fulfill your every dream and wish. It's like having a genie in a lamp. That somehow you rub it with the hands of prayer and God is somehow destined to do whatever you ask. Nothing could be further from the truth in these two verses. They have been misunderstood by many well-meaning church people. I want to literally blow that out of your mind. The point of verses 1 through 12 in chapter 7 of Matthew is about human relationships. He's already talked about the fact in chapter 6 that Randy talked about in a couple of messages he preached, and that is our relationship to what we need in order to exist. He's already talked about it. You don't have to ask God for the basic things to exist on. He already knows that. In fact, He takes care of birds that we don't even give that much thought to quite well. His point in this passage is not about satisfying your materialistic desires. The point in this passage is how you really demonstrate you're a follower of Jesus Christ in the journey of life and you know how to love people.